The desk is correct, it's trusted, and that means it's busy, which is the first time any of this costs real money. Priya forwards the invoice to Daniel with one line: "This is fine if it's right, but I need to know what we're paying for." Daniel does the obvious thing first. He swaps to the cheapest model available, and the cost line drops immediately. And so does the quality. On exactly the tickets Priya cares about most, so she rejects it within a day. The cheap answer was cheap in both directions. Freeze, because the interesting question isn't which model is cheapest, it's where the money is actually going, and nobody has looked. Here's how the exam asks it. An app sends the same large policy document with every request, and cost is dominated by input. The team needs to cut that cost without changing which model they use. What should the developer do? The item parks in the corner, and by the end you'll know which lever to reach for. Plus two ways this fails silently and never says a word about it. Call it 3 more of your 53, and it's the last piece of the how does it call Claude Quarter. Here is the whole episode in one picture. The request you send and the receipt that comes back with it, because Priya's invoice is just a month of these added up. Every request has a front that repeats, request after request, and a tail that changes every time, and nearly everything about cost comes down to that split. Start with the receipt simple version because it's simpler than people fear. You pay for what goes in and you pay for what comes back. What goes in is the whole request in the order on the card, your tool definitions, then your standing instructions, then the whole conversation so far, ending in today's question. One line to carry from episode 3: when the model thinks before answering, that thinking is billed as output, even if you never display a word of it. So, on a hard ticket, you are paying for the reasoning and the reply, and both of them come out of the same ceiling, the max tokens on screen there. And a breaking change the exam will happily test. A newer model generation counts tokens differently, so the same text can come out as noticeably more tokens than it used to. Which caught Daniel out when he reran his numbers on a newer model and nothing matched the estimates he'd written months earlier. A cost model built for one generation doesn't carry to the next, so you remeasure rather than assume, and the size of the jump leaves in the cheat sheet. Look at what the desk actually sends, request after request, because the waste shows up the moment you put two of them side by side. If a big chunk of every request is identical every time you are paying to read the same thing again and again, caching is what stops that. The mechanism has a shape you have to know because it's what most wrong answers get wrong. Caching caches a prefix, meaning the front of the request, in a fixed order: tools, then system, then messages, and those are the names printed on screen. You mark where the stable part ends with the field beside the bracket there, cache control, and everything in front of that mark gets cached. The mark has a name of its own, a breakpoint, and you are allowed more than one of them in a request. So the stable things go first, and the thing that changes goes last. Cache the front, vary the tail. Put the changing part in the middle, and everything stable that sits after it stops being cacheable. And here is the first of the two ways this fails on you without saying a word. If what you ask to cache is shorter than the model's minimum, it just doesn't cache. No error, no warning, the request runs normally and you pay full price. The only way you'd ever know is the two cache lines on the receipt, both reading 0, which is exactly where we are going next. Two more properties worth carrying. A cache entry expires, but every time it's used the clock resets, so a busy prefix stays warm on its own. And there's a longer lived option that costs more to write. The durations are numbers, so cheat sheet, but the behavior is the exam testable part. So turn the receipt over, because it's where people build their dashboards, which makes it where the mistakes get baked in. In a response, it's called usage. With caching on, the input side isn't one number, it's 3, and they're the 3 names on screen: cache read input tokens, cache creation input tokens, and input tokens. And here is the trap. The field printed there as input tokens, the one everybody reads as the input, is only that third slice. It's the leftover after the cached part, not the total. So the moment you turn caching on, that number drops sharply, while your actual input hasn't changed at all. A team watching it reads a far bigger saving than they actually got, and a team modeling cost from it undercounts every request. Your true input is all three added together. The cached part still costs you something, just much less, and writing it in costs a little more the first time. That's silent failure too. The first one quietly costs you money, and this one quietly costs you the truth about it. Token tracking isn't hard, it's just very easy to do against the wrong field. If a stem describes a cost report that stopped matching the invoice, this is the first thing to suspect. Back to Daniel's first instinct, and let's give it a fair hearing because model choice is a real lever. The exam wants tier logic, not a memorized lineup. There is a top tier for the hardest work and a middle tier that's the workhorse at scale. And there's a fast, cheap tier for high volume and simple tasks, which is the one Daniel reached for. Names and prices change every few months. The roles are what's stable, and that's what a STEM is testing. But here is the sentence from the docs that Daniel needed, and it's quotable. Tuning effort is often a better lever than switching models. Effort is how hard you ask it to think before answering, which is the thinking from episode 3 seen as a dial rather than a switch. So you turn that down on the easy tickets before you downgrade every ticket to a weaker model. That's what went wrong in the cold open. He swapped the model for every ticket when he could have turned the dial down on the easy ones instead. Watch which side of the receipt that moves, though. Effort is an output lever, so it does nothing for a bill dominated by the same document going in every time. One last tool, and it closes the loop between guessing and knowing. There's an endpoint that counts the tokens in a request before you send it. Count tokens on screen there, and it generates no answer and costs nothing, which turns cost from something you discover on an invoice into something you can check in a test. And that's the difference between a cost model and a hope. Back to the policy document at full size, and now you are armed. Option 1, switch to the cheapest available model to reduce the per token price. Option 2, cache the policy document as a stable prefix so it isn't reread on every request. Option 3, lower the output ceiling so responses are shorter. Option 4, mark each ticket's text for caching since the tickets are what change. Name the decision first. This is how does it call Claude because every option changes the shape or the cost of the call. Then read both constraints. Cost is dominated by input and the model is fixed. Hold those two while the options go down. The cheapest model dies twice and both deaths are ones you already know. It's a generic knob under rule 1 and the stem forbids changing the model at all. It's also the corpse from the cold open, where it cost Priya exactly the quality she needed. The output ceiling dies on rule 1. It's a generic knob and it's on the wrong axis entirely because the stem told you the cost is dominated by input. And caching the ticket text dies on the documented fact from the middle of this episode. Caching caches a stable prefix and the tickets are the part that changes every time. It's the most plausible sounding wrong answer here because it names the mechanism correctly and points it at exactly the wrong end of the request. What survives is caching the document, the one stable thing in every request, which is precisely what the mechanism is built for. That's the pattern for cost items. Find what repeats and stop paying for it twice before you go looking for a cheaper model. Here's what the invoice taught you, and it's one sentence. Every request is a front that repeats and a tail that changes, and the receipt says which one you are paying for. You pay for everything going in and everything coming back. Thinking is billed as output even unseen, and token counts shift between generations. The field called input tokens is only the uncached leftover, so true input is all three parts added together. Caching caches a stable prefix, so stable things go first and the changing part goes last, and below the minimum it silently does nothing. Tune effort before you switch models and count tokens before you send rather than after you are billed. The counter moves to 35 of 53 and the how does it call Claude segment is one sliver short of full. tomorrow closes it. Tomorrow, Priya wants 10,000 tickets analyzed by morning, and the overnight lane you parked in episode 1 finally gets its answer.